If everyone kindly take their seats, we'll get started. Well, I'd like to welcome you all to the main library here at Hong Kong U. I am Gary Chen, the Public Relations and Development Manager for the libraries, and we're very excited to have Mr. Tam, James Tam, here to present his book, Man's Last Song. And at the end of the session, there will be, after his talk, there will be a Q&A session, and then finally I'll close with some information on our upcoming book talks and events. Okay. And now I'll pass the microphone over to Gillian Bickley, who is our evening's moderator. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming. It's delightful to see so many people, many friends of James, and hopefully people who will be new friends and readers of his book. It's not my job to talk about the book, but to talk about James. And those people who've just come in, there's 2 seats in the front. There are 2 seats in the front. You could move my... Sorry, Darren, I didn't mean to do the videos. Thank you very much. So I know James through the Hong Kong Writers Circle, and also because I'm his publisher. I'm going to read what it says in the book. So if you want to review James' bio, buy the book, read the book, and read the bio. So James was born in Hong Kong. He lived and studied in Canada in the 70s. That doesn't date him very much. And returned to Hong Kong in the 80s to work as an environmental engineer. He started his own environmental engineering practice and additionally a software company. The software company won the premier IT Excellence Award and the Hong Kong Industry Award in 1996. In 2008, James tells us, he realized his long-term plan to leave business before too late. He doesn't tell us too late for what, but before too late, and sat down to write. Maybe before it was too late to sit down and write. Sit down. He now writes fiction and non-fiction, sometimes in English, sometimes in Chinese. His short stories and occasional poems have received honorary mentions in competitions and appeared in anthologies. His novel, Man's Last Song, is his first full-length novel. It was a finalist for the International Purvis Prize in 2011, and it won a supplementary award. Now, this is his little confession at the end. He says, as a scientific realist, often mistaken for a morbid cynic, surely not. He sees abundant evidence that 21st century Homo sapiens is a delusional and self-endangered species. I guess we all agree with the last part, but maybe not the delusional part. Nevertheless, he says he remains irrationally optimistic with a lovely family. You see his wife and one of his daughters here this evening. So I'm sure we agree with him that he does have a lovely family. So now I'm going to let James take over and tell us whatever he wants to tell us about his book. I hope you'll be thinking about difficult questions to ask him afterwards. Can you catch him out on his logic or his conclusions? I'm sure he'll be very capable of answering.
Thanks, Gillian. Thanks, Gillian. Before too late, it's always relative. You know, some people thought I retired too early from productive work, and I always think it's well, whether I retire earlier or not depends on when I die, right? If I die tomorrow, I retire very late. But if I live a long life, then yes, I retire early. And so far, I'm not regretting. And I have to thank the library, thanks Gary for the excellent arrangement. It's really professional, and I'm very happy to be here to give a talk about my book, maybe not quite a book, but a background of how the book came about, and therefore bring on some of my irrelevant opinions. I have a lot of them.
That we know.
Yeah.
Too well. Too well.
Because of that, I find it always a bit, difficult to give a talk at university because you don't know who's in the audience. I know a number of friends, but there's a possibility of, an expert here who really knows something I pretend to know is very high. Therefore, I take the unusual step of first giving a disclaimer. I haven't had a TV at home since 1982. And I do not normally read the newspaper. In fact, I very rarely read the newspaper. So I'm very out of touch with mainstream opinion, which is part of the reason why I remain, as Gillian introduced, irrationally optimistic. But the thing is, according to my non-mainstream impression, whenever people accuse me of I don't know what I'm talking about, I have to say they're right. They're always right. But the thing is, they don't know. They also don't know what they're talking about. That is the problem. Because according to my non-mainstream impression, the world is becoming dangerously, maybe irresponsible is not the right word, but it's a PowerPoint, it's the world. It's very disoriented in my but without many people noticing. I was going to say in my view, but I don't think it's my view. I think a lot of us agree with that. So anyway, that's my disclaimer. But there is one. Well, when I say the world has become quite dangerously disoriented or irresponsible, I think there is one strange consensus. This is a consensus from my observation among people from different nationalities, from different cultural background, for religious affiliation. Everyone seems to agree on one thing, is that there's something wrong with the way things are going. And I think there's very few objection to that. But what is it, and as a result, we talk about it. Everyone talks about it. There's a lot of discussion about that. Although I definitely know nothing about anthropology, but I do wonder, did Homo sapiens talk ourselves to the top of the food chain? If not, we're certainly doing a lot of talking at the top of the food chain, and hopefully it would help us to stay there. But it's okay to just have problems and discuss problems. That's part of human nature, I suppose. However, the problems we face now, a lot of them will eventually affect the planet, or more specifically, affect the suitability of this planet for human habitation at current population and rate of consumption. I think that's just mathematics. And also perspective. It reminds me of a talk I gave on this prestigious campus some years ago. I think at the time I was the chairman of the Hong Kong Institution of Engineers Environmental Division, therefore the honor. And I came to talk. I think the students were expected, everyday environmentalists, technical tree-hugging talk. But I came here. The first thing I noticed was a very cute poster, a poster of the Earth, a globe. The globe somehow with little arms growing, from the equator, and rubbing eyes grown roughly at the position of the United States. I think that's an unintentional good touch. But but the Earth is crying, and then there's a very large size font at the bottom which says, "Save me," you know. The Earth is crying, save me. So when I gave a talk, my opening remark was quite realistic, but realism back then already was labeled cynicism. So I was being quite cynical also at the same time, and I just said, I said, Mother Earth doesn't. Our Mother Earth is not more than just being asexual. Our Mother Earth also doesn't care. Mother Earth doesn't care whether any humans left on this planet tomorrow. If every single one of us die, the Earth would be not happier or not unhappier. I think you would see later that, in fact, in some aspects, a lot of things will become happier. But in any event, it would continue to spin around itself and the sun doing its cosmic ballet. So I said, what we need to see is that it's not the Earth we're trying to save, it's us, it's our own habitation. I think a few people got that. So that's the point. When that happened, will we be missed? You know, that's the theme of the book. There's no more people. When there's no more people, will we be missed? And as there will be some description in the book, in the absence of humans, the planet makes a happy comeback. The sky is blue, full of stars. In the moonless night, you can see the bottom of Victoria Harbour. There will be dolphins diving through Victoria Harbour. Believe it or not, and free of charge. You don't have to pay any glass-bottom boats and stuff like that. And it'll be teeming with fish. And so I don't think anyone will miss us. Not even us, because we won't be here. Right? That's it. But the interesting thing is that it's not like that we don't know our position, where we are in the big picture. You know, we are not very knowledgeable. In fact, I have great confidence in how little we know in the big picture. But relatively, in our small little world, we have collected a lot of data. We are quite knowledgeable. We're knowledgeable enough to know that we're downright negligible in the grand scale of things. Why? Just look at what we have learned from astronomy. There are approximately, close to 1 trillion stars by our estimation, and because the other estimation is pointless. If they talk about infinite universe, infinite parallel universe, there are infinite things out there. And just within Milky Way, there are hundreds of billions of stars in Milky Way. And Milky Way, when you go out further, it's only one dot in the sky. And our planet is not particularly large, not even particularly small. It's very mediocre. And we are one out of another hundreds and hundreds of billions of life forms on this mediocre planet. Although, yes, we are on top of things for the moment, but we have only appeared quite recently. And we have, in this book, there are lots of, a few, not a lot, but a few reflections of the past. And this is one of them, a character called John Johnson. He was wondering out loud why the human race is disappearing. Out of 1,000 living things that ever roamed the planet, 999 are long gone. That's a fact. That's as far as we know. Thoroughly dead. This is a spooky place. Death Valley in the Milky Way. Fine. And mankind has been around for only a little more than 1 pitiful minute if the age of Earth is put into a 24-hour time scale. He's heard all that before. We're downright negligible, okay? And extinction seems unavoidable, natural, even expected. Certainly not surprising. But wait. He said, wait, because this John Johnson is a tough guy. You know, he used to be a soldier. And he's not giving up easily, so maybe we'll leave him to contemplate for a little while about position in the big picture, and return a little bit to the problems we mentioned about the humanities facing this moment. I mean, not in the book. It baffled me for a while. Why can't we see the existential threats we've created for ourselves, given the limited knowledge, but enough sufficient knowledge that we have? Why, I mean, isn't survival kind of important? Survival is a very strong animal instinct, and all these things is affecting our very survival, and we seem to be very blind to it, which kind of, you think about it, it's kind of baffling, because it's our animal nature to react to it, but we don't, Maybe because we're confused while in the situation, with some hindsight help, because a lot of wise people have said that hindsight is a 20/20 vision. So I said, well, if hindsight help, let there be hindsight, and there was hindsight. And I created an imagined future, and from an imagined future, I see a few main issues, a few main causes of the current problems. Number one is overpopulation. Number two is excessive consumerism and disproportionate environmental degradation, dysfunctional politics. Someone's laughing. And also human relationships don't seem to be able to catch up with abrupt lifestyle changes and incessant distractions. You see that I have italicized some of the quantifiers over here for a reason. It's not just for style. It kind of look good too, but and incessant should be in italic as well. Because you look at it, all these words by itself, it's not a problem. Population, of course, is not a problem. Without population, well, when there's life, there's population. And there's nothing wrong with population because without it, we're not even qualified to cause problems. And when there's life, when there's population, we'll consume something. Even eating rice, that's a kind of consumption. We are here to consume, like all the other animals on the planet. And of course we are at the top of the pyramid, so it's only right that we are quite clever. We are a lot more clever than our monkeys and monkey ancestors. So we will be manufacturing, we'll be doing something. And I don't see anything wrong with it. And this is inevitable, right? And when we do that, there will be environmental footprints. Everyone leaves environmental footprint. Of course we do. Even a goldfish leaves environmental footprint, although they don't have feet. But fin print. So that's nothing wrong with that also. And politics. Politics has become a very negative term all over the world. It shouldn't be, because don't forget, human beings got to the comfortable top of the food chain because we know how to organize leadership, and the smart guys take us into situations, take us ahead, take risk, and so on. And so what's wrong with politics? And that's part of politics. And through that there will be, of course, there will be power struggle, different opinion. This is all very human for thousands of years. And then life always changes. There is no permanence. We all know that. We don't have to be a Buddhist to see that life changes all the time. You cannot depend on anything. But the problem are all the yellow italics, overpopulation, when there are way too many of us. And when consumerism, you see that consumerism, the way we're consuming is almost for no reason. We're not benefiting ourselves. And then environmental degradation becomes, as a result, disproportionate. We are doing a lot of things that don't have to be this way. And politics it becomes dysfunctional. I'll go into all this in a little bit. And of course, lifestyle can change. It has been evolving, or it's always evolving. You cannot stop it. But you also see that this has been very abrupt, and we don't seem to be able to handle it. And the distractions we create for ourselves seems to be much worse than opium. We are constantly checking our iPhone. Oh, where's my phone, by the way? You got my phone. We're constantly checking it. People will just be checking the phone. We're texting while giving a talk. And I'm very happy. No one is texting right now. Something is wrong. The last few talks I gave, in fact, I used to sometimes give a talk to the environmental graduates at the graduating class at this university. They were they started out to be very impressive. Good questions. We have like the best young men in Hong Kong came to this university. I should have corrected my grammar, sorry. But then the last one I gave, seriously, only 3 persons sat in the front were listening to me, and the rest were running around, they were exchanging, they were texting each other and then showing each other the hard copy of the text. It's gone, I think that one, I think it was Master Nan Haijing, I read one of his books. He said that the 20th century disease would be cancer. Is that the 21st century disease that plague humanity will be mental disease. I think he's right. It's not a crazy idea. And because all these issues are interrelated. They are the causes as well as consequence of each other. I think it should be quite obvious. For example, progress increases life expectancy, therefore it boosts population. Don't forget for example, in 1949 when China made the new changes, that life expectancy was 35, and now it's in its late 70s, maybe. For women always live longer for some reason. I never figured that out. Maybe talking helps. And more resources are needed to satisfy the expanded middle class, which wants and not needs. That is a very the most the important point is that a lot of time we don't need things. We just want. It reminds me of a saying of one of my Canadian friends. He gave me a good description of the southern neighbors. I don't think that's fair. I think it applies to all of us. All of us have become that way. Is that we have become people who buy things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't like. But that is the situation. So, but because of this wanting things we don't need, we've forgotten that there's a huge environmental cost to that. And resource demands results in environmental pressure. But consumption cannot. And we say, what about consumption slowing down? But it cannot slow down because as a population increase, we need the consumption to catch up actually. Because otherwise, if you don't have the activities to catch up, a lot of people will be doing nothing. And when people are doing nothing, so far we haven't figured out a way to deal with it. It's not a matter of just economic communism or something. It just doesn't work. It's not human nature. And when people have nothing to do, they would cause trouble to themselves and others. So activities are created for the sake of activities to keep the economy going, to keep our present model going. And that's another small paragraph I taken from the book. And what's worse is that you'll see that rich nations were fatally dependent on suicidal growth and consumption. Poor nations strove to become the same. there was no turning back. Humans were being chased down the cliff by the hungry tigers they had raised. Keep running and jump, or stop and be eaten. One character, actually, it's not so serious. I know it sounds so serious now. You know, I notice people starting to, look very depressed. It's not. The way I present all this, I do have a lot of questions, but I don't have the answer. I can't even pretend I have the answer. And through two diametrically opposed characters. One is the die-hard workaholic. You can call him a multi-corporation loyalist and a capitalist. And the other guy is it's a very highly intelligent dropout, and he worked in the civil service and figured out how to recirculate his files so that he can work on the same thing year after year without damaging the environment. I never did that. I never worked for the civil service. And so that guy described this situation as a hole-digging economy. He said, you think about the economy. What is the economy that we take so much pride in? Imagine if I dig a hole in the ground. I'm crazy. I'm hyper. I dig a big hole in the ground, and this gentleman standing decide to fill it back up. And then I said, why did they fill up my hole? So I dig the hole again, and they filled it up again. And then so I hire more people because I've got some money, some venture capitalist is behind me. I hire a lot of people to fill it up faster. You hire a lot of, to dig it out faster. You hire a lot of people to fill it up faster. I start to talk to the manufacturers. They do research, invent machines to dig the hole fast and deep, and then you invent machines to dig the hole fast and deep. Now we're creating a lot of activities in the factory. There's researchers, there's engineers, and they're doing all these things. And engineers, of course, they go home, they think they have a very meaningful job, right? And then they go home, they're stressed, they're bad breath, but then they say, well, but I've got a job to do. You don't know, I've got to come up with this new design for a hole digging machine within 2 weeks, otherwise my boss would fine me. Oh, sorry, darling, yeah, go ahead, think about it. And all these are happening, and then don't forget, behind them, you need support, so you need accountant, you need a controller, you even need HR manager, believe it or not. And all these happen, and then when they go to work, they need commuting, they need daycare for the kids, and so on. You think about it, a very vibrant economy can actually develop from a hole in the ground, which only a part-time hole in the ground. The analogy might be absurd, but the principle is not, to me anyway. But I'm absurd. And another issue is wastefulness. I'm not a tree hugger. I enjoy my luxuries and so on. I take plane rides. But a lot of what we do is wasteful. And what's worse, it's encouraged systemically. Nobody would ever admit that they encourage wastefulness. Everyone is very environmentally conscious, but in fact there are many examples. Over-specifications, for example, a ridiculously conservative estimate of expiry life of food, of medicine, of everything. When eye drops, when I was a kid, I buy eye drops. I use it for years, Although my eyesight is not very good, maybe it's partly due to that. I use it for years. Now you look at it, it said once it's open for a month, I have to throw it away. I've only used 2 drops and I have to throw it away. But this is all done by marketing managers and marketing, and I'm just using 2 very petty examples, but there are lots of examples of this kind of wastefulness. I used to say, if we can somehow deal with this systemic wastefulness, we can solve maybe 30, maybe even 50% of our environmental problem without changing our lifestyles. Then it brings me to think about traditional work ethics. especially us in Hong Kong, Chinese, we brought up the highest virtue, according to my father, is to respect him, of course. And number two is to work hard. And we all, I have no problem with working hard, and I have worked very hard for a couple of decades. It aged me tremendously. But and I think that there is nothing wrong with working hard. But if we are working hard to make a living, it's very admirable and necessary. But a lot of what we're working seems to be counterproductive with no beneficiaries. That's my point again. And when in the corporate world, I never stopped being amazed by a lot of the work that we do is completely pointless. I really do mean pointless, including documents that stamp very important and confidential. And normally I just leave it sit there for a couple of days and then I look at it, and I know from experience it's not very important. And there's no point being confidential because it just makes the person feel good. Right? I tell you something, here's listen, confidential. And there's nothing. But we have so much of that work in the modern world, and a little bit of that is cute. But again, it's a matter of proportion. I do think we've overdone, and and don't forget, if I may remind you again, all these have an environmental cost, which very easily we overlook. We're only doing it in the beginning, just just for fun. I create work. So we keep each other employed. There's no harm in it. But all these extra activities have an environmental cost. And being a pseudo-technician, but another thing I see is, that's why it bring me to seeing the next issue, is that but a lot of the problems we face now actually have solutions. They do have technical solutions. They may not be perfect, but it's not like that we look at it and just be helplessly and say, oh, there's nothing we can do. Most of them, there's a lot we can do. Even global warming, we've known global warming for decades, and no one can do anything. Now finally they say they're going to do something. Whether it's true or not, we have to wait and see, but according to most experts' opinion, it's already too late, but it's better than nothing. But why do we have to wait so long? I think that if I can sum it up, it seems that when planetary affairs becomes more complex, prodigiously complex, because of the reason I just talked about, we're creating a multitude of activities that a lot of them are not necessarily rational. Because a situation is so complex, it requires long-term vision, and long-term vision naturally requires consistent adjustment, because we cannot see what we should do in the next 50 years and be right. Obviously, it would be only a rough framework with lots of uncertainties that require trial and error. So we need consistent adjustments and difficult trade-offs. But at the same time, politics have become very short-term and demagogic, very populist. So you can see politics. We have to rely on politics. That's the only institution we have to solve human problems. And human problems have become very complex and long-term, yet politics become very short-term and populist. So the problem persists. That's why in the beginning I say when we have these problems, we just talk and talk and talk. Because why? So far we can still afford it, and talking about it makes us feel good. I talk about the problem, right? I care. And what do you do about it? Well, I don't know, up to the government, up to what if he's no good? Then you elect another one, and he's worse. Now that's the terrifying picture I see from the future. You might have forgotten. All this is because I've created fictional hindsight, and I look back and I saw all this, and it's terrifying, it's depressing. I'm really sorry, but I can't lie, it's a fact. However, there's always hope in storyland. That's what I learned when I was a kid, so thought, well, that's why I started to write fiction. In fact, when I retired, I wanted to write a book, but I learned I wanted to write an easy to understand design textbook on wastewater treatment. Can you imagine? But then after all this, I decided to write fiction, and then I asked myself, I've never written fiction before. But I said, well, I've written a lot of board papers before, so I know how to lie in a convincing way and be creative with my writing. So here I go. The first thing I find out actually when I created in hindsight also is hindsight depends on situation, not just time. If a situation hasn't changed, you can go 1,000 years into the future, you would not develop that 2020 vision. But if the situation has changed, even though you don't go very far into the future, you do develop this hindsight. And that's the novel, Man's Last Song. Believe it or not, I always come up with the title of my stories before I start writing. I don't know why, I still do. And that's a very lonely person. That's Man's Last Song. He's actually, his hands are in his pocket. He's not being unhygienic. But even if he is, it doesn't matter anymore, because there's no people around to demand his courtesy. In the year 2090, that basically, after decades of universal sterility, the human race is dying out. The youngest man alive, his name is Song Sang, Hong Kong Eurasian. He's already 40 years old. He's the youngest man alive. That basically is the background setting of the story. Terrible, isn't it? That might sound a bit far-fetched, but if you think about it, statistically, well, I also take this little paragraph from the book. Statistically, human existence is a miracle. It is a miracle, you know. But once existence has happened, the eventual extinction is certain. If not because of this, it is because of that. It's only a matter of time. Unless you take a more conventional religious view, that's just a statement, and it's there's nothing we can do about it. And as another character speculates the reason for universal sterility, and I will offer that. Like I say, it's only a speculation, and it says, well, the atmosphere is a thin crust of the planet, proportionally like the skin of an apple. Our planet is 10,000 kilometers in diameter, roughly. Our atmosphere is only a few kilometers. Something that humans had been jamming into it for decades, perhaps centuries, suspecting no harm, accumulated quietly. Parts per trillion became parts per billion. Parts per billion became parts per million. Obliviously, breath by breath, our mysterious, and it is very mysterious, and fragile reproductive systems were nibbled at, eaten alive by our own waste. One day, it snapped. You know, to me, it's not that far-fetched, and there is a lot. We think that we know a lot. It's only an impression. We know very little, even about our own planet. Not to say the existence of life, not to say the far end of the universe, what is parallel universe, what is infinity. We know nothing about those. We also know very little about our planet. We just think we do. I'll give you an example. I just said our diameter is 10,000 kilometers. What's the deepest hole we've drilled we can reach artificially? I think it's about 1 kilometer. I'm not sure. You have to Google. Don't trust it. But you know, make it double, 2 kilometers. In that order of magnitude. This is how far we can penetrate. We don't even know what's in the center of this planet. You know, everything is a speculation. But we make it so convincing, just like board paper, just like novel, Most people believe it, and then we have high confidence. Anyway, so that's the background. That's how the setting came about. And of course, I'm an engineer by my background is in engineering. It's one thing when I read books, I'm always very critical. Come on, that's not possible. Come on, that doesn't make sense. You know, the numbers don't add up. So when I do it myself, I actually I've done quite a bit of research, and I actually do my own numerical simulation, and I show, and all these are not in the book. So you haven't bought all this. That would be extremely boring. No. But it is my background to satisfy myself that this is what it's possible. And this one, interesting is the average age. You would see that it's the average age there's no more baby in the beginning of the graph on the left-hand side, right? And then average age would go up, obviously, because there's no more babies, no more young people. The average age of this planet would climb steadily. And there's no more babies. Why would the average age come down? You know, so there are a few events in here. For example, the most important one being at some point we cannot afford to generate electricity anymore. And you think about it, if there's no more electricity on this planet, our life expectancy would plunge immediately. There's no more life artificially suspended by electrons. And that's the overall population. And here you would see something that most end of the world scenario do not expect. And I was slightly surprised. I started with 7 billion people, which actually, by the way, 7 billion people is what we have today. I want to do a last minute check. So, you know, just in case there's a population expert in the audience.
Close to.
I checked that. Yeah, that's a few hours ago. A few hours ago, according to current world population, it's already 7.4 billion. Increasing at 20 million every year. And that's a few hours ago. That'll be more now, I know. I know. And first talk about this graph is that and then the plunges happen. I find out that if I just leave everything as it is, number one, I came up with the conclusion, the inevitable conclusion. In such a scenario, no more babies. That would be to the disappointment of movie makers and eschatologists. They're called eschatologists. Can you imagine they have a word for people who specialize in the end of the world? But to their disappointment, there will be no drama. There's no dragon fights in the sky, no Armageddon and all that stuff. It would just be a slow, drawn-out death in that case. And the world would go on for a long time, in my conclusion, doing what we're doing now. Because why? Because with such a large population, and there will be less and less incentive, almost no incentive to start wars under that situation because there's no new generation. And the only way for everyone to survive is to do whatever we've been doing. And we will postpone retirement to, the late 70s or whatever. And we continue to do what we're doing. We all have food. The supermarket's still open. Electricity is still running the machines and so on. There's no other option. So, but when I find out that scenario, I was shocked because can you imagine how boring the story is going to be? You know, just things as usual for the next 40 years and then they die off. But I found out that actually no. At some point, number one, there will be popular. There are reasons that we are becoming more and more concerned with, such as epidemics. That's a big thing. Just think of the last few years. We're all familiar with chicken flu, and then there was pig flu, and then there's Ebola, and before there's, of course, there's AIDS, and now there's one I've forgotten how to Zika. I forgot because I've lost interest in them. Too many. You know, and so they will, under that situation, there will be some batch reduction of in population. And also, you see that big plunge is once electricity is turned off, I figure a lot of old people would just die right away, huh? You know, and because very, very soon, when we lose that artificial capability. So by the time you see that at the very end of the curve, that's where our story, you know, the plateau at the bottom. And when there's only maybe roughly in Hong Kong, I figure the whole of Hong Kong might have about 2,000 people left, and inherit this all the infrastructure, and then that's our story. A lot of scenes take place. But when that happened, I call them postmodern savages. These people, imagine if only a few thousand people living in Hong Kong, all the buildings and everything. You can live on the peak for free, you know, the real, but very few people will live on the peak. That's my speculation, because it's humid and we're all old people. You don't want to walk up and down the peak, it's inconvenient. So ironically, the real estate price for the peak for the first time dropped to something that's affordable to everyone in Hong Kong. So and then no one wants to live there. I call them Stone Age, postmodern savages. But comparing with real Stone Age, their ancestors, there are a few differences. Number one, we have knowledge. So it's easier to survive. We know what's coming, we know what's happening, we know about the typhoons, we know about animals and so on. And we also have secure shelters. Everyone can have a few apartment blocks to themselves. In fact, one of the characters, Ray was raising chicken in one of the most expensive penthouses in mid-level. I suppose that's a social statement. And also there's plenty of leftover fine spirits. That's important, because I figured, well, wine might go bad, but things like cognac, they don't go back. And when it's free, and there's a happy hour 24 hours a day, and there's only a few people around. And so what happened to men, especially when there are lots of free drinks and lots of time, so they just talk and talk and talk, just like what we do. But there's pros and cons. There's another thing is our ancestors, Stone Age ancestors, don't think too much. Whereas in this situation, our children in the future, and there's only so few of them left, they might think too much, and the psychological condition would be different. But anyway, when they talk a lot, and they with their fictional hindsight, we do look ridiculous, and that's where some of these questions come out. And they are very serious questions, and a few of the playful answers are given in the book. That's why they look at us as unthinking and an unthinking, self-endangered species. That's why I like to. It's one of my favorite terms when I refer to people. I like to call ourselves Homo sapiens. Any Latin experts here? I think it means kind of a thinking monkey, that kind. But we have stopped thinking, so I think we should change our name. We shouldn't call ourselves thinking monkey anymore, because that's inappropriate. And we are a self-endangered species, while we worry about other species are being endangered by us too. Yeah, I have said about that. And what happened, just a few words on their present. What happened to them when they live in this situation? Well, there are many things that can be painful, comical, and maybe painful and comical at the same time. For example, losing a dental filling, losing one's dental fillings or spectacles can be disastrous. Imagine when we live, it's good life, right? You just do a bit of gardening, chicken, and lots of Louis XIV or whatever, because you wouldn't drink anything cheaper. What's the point? They're all free, right? And but one day you're eating nothing but something soft like a potato, and your dental filling come off, and it happened to be a big one. Of course, only the big ones fall off. can you imagine how distressed you would be because there's no more dentist around, and you know, and the tooth is still there, you cannot pull it out, and you know there could be just a thin layer between, you know, at the bottom of your tooth, you know, connected to a nerve, and that nerve is also very tiny, but it connects right to the brain, and it will make you scream when one day you say, and then you know. And losing your spectacles is just, it's similar. Once you lose your spectacles, to get it made again is possible, but very, very difficult. And more sentimentally, what does love means in the circumstances? You might say, well, love is love. What has love got to do with the circumstances? They are, you know, a lot of what we do. For example, in the opening chapter of the book, you would find a stranger. You know, our main character run into a stranger is dying on the peak path by the side of the road. He wants to help him. Of course he wants to help him. When you see, it's our nature, we see someone dying on the road, you want to help him. But then you think about it, there's no way you can take care of this person under the situation. And then, but on the other hand, you know, what we would do now is just to make a phone call, 999, very easy, right? You know, and then you say, oh, this guy dying on the road, on the street side, can you send an ambulance? Hurry, okay, you know. And someone come, and then you introduce this person to the medics, and then you have to go, right? You got a meeting to go to. And you feel very good, you're late for the meeting, and you say, oh, because there's someone on the road and I help you. Everyone says, oh, you're such a nice guy, right? And because it's so affordable, everyone can do it, you know. Unless you're already late for the meeting, that's another issue, you know. But in their circumstances, they cannot help it, it's very painful. And another human means a lot more to them than to us. Another human on the street to us is annoying, but to them, another human being on the street is very precious, and he's in need of help, yet you have to let him die. Between father and son, at some point, the father understands that I'm getting old. All kinds of things can happen. If something happened, my son will no doubt want to take care of me. But can he? And now I would be so much of a distraction to his life. I'll be so much of a burden. What really should I do if I love my son? So these are very painful questions, and it's real to them, you know. And even between men and women, I think I have to say that I think that I've been very biased. I think women will play a much stronger role in a situation like this because women are closer to their instincts, whereas I think us men have lost our instincts much easier in this kind of social environment. So, also the natural instinct for women to want the species to continue at all cost is much higher than men. Men never care about these things. I still don't. You know. So all this and spirituality, and comparing with their Stone Age ancestors, if something is wrong, they are not feeling happy, they would pray to the rock, pray to the tree, and feel much better, and pray to God. But our postmodern savages have lost all that because they know too much. But the situation makes them start wondering again about God, you know, what's Tao, what's nature, and also why people work so much. And also they have to battle with simple things like mosquitoes. There will be no repellent. The repellent would be truly expired this time. And also absolute and irreversible solitude. You know, it is something that is very, if you imagine it, it takes a lot of mental strength to deal with. So, is that the end? I know, I think the time is up, so it has to be the end. And I leave you with the question. A lot of people ask me, and I'm so tired of answering it, but if you ask this question, I'll answer it again, one last time. Is that dystopian or utopian? You know, I really think it depends on your perspective. And That's my blog. I mean, I try to maintain writing discipline bilingually. I write in English and Chinese on my blog, but I find that it does maintain writing discipline, but it's distracting me from working on my next project. Why work too much anyway? So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, James. That was a splendid talk, and I'm sure you've got lots of questions, perhaps even objections to what James had to say. So, who would like to ask a question or make a comment? Do you want to say your name?
Hi, my name is Shreya. I have already read James's book, and those who haven't, I'd like to say that there's a lot of humor in the book, so don't think that it's a very dry topic, and there are lots of quotes in the book which will catch you, and you would have to reread them, and I marked them again and again and again and again, so I'm very happy James wrote such a nice book. Very nice book.
Are you recording that?
Yeah.
He didn't pay me for this purpose.
Yeah. Got her.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you, so you gave those 4 causes, say overpopulation, excessive consumerism, politics, and exploitation of nature. I want to connect it to something that you wrote in the book, which is about the moment we come to be, our existence is already at a stressful level, and so it's trying to not be. So if are those causes related to that stress? And if it is so, if your answer is so, then all the dystopia that has happened was meant to be. Is that what you're trying to say, or is there any other thought to that?
Yes, I think that ultimately is the. I think you can hear me without this. Ultimately, it is the answer, because there is a.
I need to use it so it's recorded.
Okay. Yeah. I'll try to use this. Because I think that's the nature of things. You know, although that is slightly on a philosophical level. That's why I didn't want to mention it, because it might affect book sales, you see. You know, and but actually it is. Anything that comes into being, I did mention it. One existence is itself is a miracle by statistical chance. But once it's happened, it will 100%, 100.00% extinction is inevitable. It will happen. So maybe it is within our program to let things, to see things reach its peak and then go up and down. However, if you look at human history, we do go through a lot of cycles, and that cycles are inevitable. Anyone who think that I can invent some social system or whatever that will last forever, this is a good system, it will last forever, he is either insane or very stupid. So stop talking to him. Because it's not possible and it will never happen. Whatever good system, eventually it will age, it will rot, and we will need to reinvent it. So I don't know whether to answer your question, but I think that's the nature of thing that's inescapable.
Thank you. It was an excellent question to begin with. So other comments or questions? It hasn't got to be such a complicated question as the first one. It can be a really simple question. Yes, please. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Brooke, and I know James through the Hong Kong Writers Circle. I'm always curious. You came to the book with a concept of what you wanted to do, but I'm always curious if writers have their characters in mind, or if they just start writing and the characters arrive.
I have the overall concept, the setting, what I want to say, and I have this kind of story, especially the kind I kind of like. There's no plot. I don't have plots. I wake up and discover. When I was working on it 8 months, it was basically full time. It was very interesting. I wake up early in the morning, and then I have ideas. Yes, that's what he's going to do today. It's not like I was discovering. I was only a reporter. I was discovering what the characters are going through every day, and I just jot it down. Sometimes even 5 o'clock in the morning, I'll be making secret messages, and my wife is getting very suspicious. I have to thank my wife. You see the slides. The PowerPoint is beautiful, you know, because Satu, it's a PowerPoint genius. But anyway,
I got that on tape.
And that's not even a lie. But when it comes to the characters, I did plan it very in great detail. Of course, it's not in the book. When I started out planning, okay, there's this number of people stuck in that situation, I would write a CV for each of them. I actually would say, for example, Song Song, how tall he is. He's 6 feet tall. He's 42 years old now. He's got curly hair, and his physique, his education, and his father. I'll say, when did he go to where to study, what he studied. He studied engineering, by the way. And what are his marks like? These are all irrelevant. You won't see it in the book also. But if I do not build up the character to that kind of detail, like a good friend of mine I know very well, and I can close my eyes and see him, it would be very difficult to imagine what he wants to do next, you know, in the book. So I think that in terms of the characters, I actually spend a lot of time. I can send you the CVs of some of them. No one's ever read that except me.
I think that's really important, particularly if you're going to write a series with the same characters. If you haven't made a note of how tall they are, what colour hair they have, incredible inconsistencies can arise. So I think this is a very professional attitude. The fact that these points are not stated in the book is actually irrelevant, but that you know them, and so everything is consistent with itself. Other questions? Yes.
Yeah. I'm an engineer, yes, PS. A golf friend with James. I know James first time in the golf course.
You don't read.
Yeah, I don't even read your book. Yeah. I think you said the end of the world is 2090. To me, I think it's a bit too soon. And you are the 4 reasons causes of this end. Just these 4 causes, I don't think is convincing. Look at your graph. I missed the point. You say the demographic will be dropped, significantly, unless there is some sort of disease that which we cannot cure, mainly disease or whatever, which is just like the SARS or Zika, whatever, or Ebola, which we cannot cure, then
it will be gradual, very slow.
Yeah, but the graph you saw is dropped very significantly. Yeah, that's unless there's some sort of things, because human beings exist for several million years, and the cultures we have civilizations 10,000 years, and it takes 80 years from now to get to the end. A bit too soon, So you have to give more reasoning.
Why do you care? You'll be dead anyway.
Number one, I want to look at the average age again. The average age actually is quite high, which reflects our current very highly developed societies. It's around 80, and then it dropped. Now you look at that, what you've missed is that number one, the important drop is when there is no more electricity. When they just cannot afford. There's no more mining. There's no more mining of natural gas and coal and so on. So you cannot generate power anymore. Once you cannot generate power anymore, you cannot sustain our current medical system. And once that fails, our life expectancy would drop very dramatically down from 80 something to back down to like maybe 50, 60, whatever, So that's one of the reasons. And the other reason, other big drops are due to epidemics. You know, like I have a chapter on epidemics. You know, make it look like the bacteria are actually enemies. They do plot how to kill strategically, you know, how to kill off as many people as possible and so on. 2090 may be a bit too soon, and but you are assuming it is the end. Ah, thank you very much for asking that question. Because I could put a question mark and I've forgotten to mention. Is it the end? You know, you were assuming it's the end. I was assuming it's the end too. When I was writing the book, that's how I don't care. And I think it's against my amoral principle to contrive a happy ending. So I didn't have anything in mind, seriously. I open-mindedly reaching the end of the book, but then the real end of the book surprised me. It surprised me so much, I almost cried, you know. You won't believe it, but I was going through a lot of stress at the time. And it surprised me, and I hope it would surprise you too. And you know, and the discovery enjoyable when you find out. Now I will ask you next time what the end is. You have to at least read the last few pages. Yeah.
Can I just add a point?
Yeah.
As an electrical power engineer, I don't believe you are reasoning. You know, there will be a lot of electricity. The water will still running. We still have hydro. We still have wind, solars. You know, so power failure or power existence of electricity power is not one of the main reasons for these problems. It will come from some other things, bacteria, or some sort of disease that cannot cure, you know. But not electricity generally. Otherwise, you know, you are an engineer as well, and I'm an engineer, you know, so
I'm not, I'm a writer.
you're not. We are useless, you know.
Bicycles too.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. But you know, it's not in the beginning. That's why when you see that graph, it lasts a long time. Everything will continue, but at some point, when the average age is already reaching the 70s, you cannot maintain power plants like this. And in fact, if you do read the book, you'll find out that that's not a spoiler, because that's a principle. You know, how the power plant get closed down, because at some point we start to plan, you know, because these are hazardous facilities. You don't want the power plant, number one, Hong Kong has no hydroelectricity, and you don't want the power plant to close themselves. So if the remnant population at some point would decide, you know, we can't go on anymore. Look around this room. Everyone, the youngest man around is in his 70s, you know, and then you said, if we don't close it down, you know, there are still a handful of younger people. It will be a disaster for them. So especially nuclear power plant has to be closed down, decommissioned. And in fact, in the decommissioning process, the VIP gives speeches, and VIPs always pretend nothing is going to happen. This is temporary. You would make a good one. He said, this is only temporary. Don't worry, we will reopen, and I look forward to the reopening party with you. And then they 3, 2, 1, they switch the power off, and a few very stupid people even clap. You know.
You have to write another story. Part 2.
Thank you very much. Now, who else has got specialised expertise?
Well, not so much specialized expertise, but I do have a couple of questions. The first one is that when you were describing the creative process of waking up every morning and then sort of going through life with your characters and then jotting down the notes and all that, like a reporter, I'm curious, did your characters think in Chinese or English, or both? And did they do so, the same characters, do so consistently from day to day? Or, like, for example, I mean, if a certain character does not know Chinese and only knew English on a certain day, would he, the next day, suddenly know Chinese as well? And were they consistent in that sense? And my second question is, was there any reason why you chose Eurasian as your main character?
I'll answer the second one first because I love Eurasians. Because my daughter is Eurasian. So I'm biased. And I think they're wonderful people when they listen. And by the way, Tom's Eurasian too. What's the first one? Okay. Look, the English, that's a very interesting question, Tom, and I didn't even ask you to ask that. Because my writing process, when I write, although with Man's Last Song I wrote a lot in English, really, 70–80% in English before I start my Chinese version. And they are not translation of each other. They're just parallel development. And I discovered one thing which I think a lot of academics have pointed it out, but I never experienced the impact, which is quite dramatic, is that I've written something in English and then I write the same thing in Chinese. I discovered that not always, but maybe a good 20–30% of the book, I think differently when I'm writing the Chinese version, because I see things differently. It's a different perspective. The value systems would be different. The solution would be different. The reaction would be different. And therefore, some of them can be re-exported back to the English version. Some of them I just left it. And if eventually you have the English and Chinese version, you will find out that parts of it are completely different. Completely different because they cannot be translated like the sutras. And so I just left it at that. But when I wrote it, most of the time, because I started out the English as the foundation, most of the time, yes, at that time I would be all thinking in English, because otherwise it would be, it would be a waste of time, wouldn't it?
I thought it would be the circle of life. How mostly everyone thinks that Asians roam the world first. They would be the last to end the world. And that would be the circle of life.
That's a good point. I didn't think of it that way, but it could be. Yeah. Although, or maybe eventually walk back to Africa and die.
Yes, but I think you were saying, can I just comment on that? You were asking whether the characters thought in English or Chinese, not whether James was thinking in English or Chinese. Is it the same answer?
Yeah, I think.
Same answer. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And now we have another question. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Rebecca, and I also know James through the Hong Kong Writers Circle. And my question to you is, because people often say that a novelist's first book is the most autobiographical. So I want to know how much of you yourself are in this novel in terms of characters. And you said that the ending surprised you, because you're kind of grappling and meditating on these big philosophical issues that humankind faces. So my second question that's sort of related to the first one, how autobiographical is this, is what did you learn about yourself through writing the process of this novel? Like, did you learn anything new, philosophical or like personal? Because it's a very introspective novel in terms of and I know you to be a very, meditative and philosophical person in person. So I was wondering, what did you learn about yourself through this process, and did you surprise yourself in terms of who you are, who you think you are, and how you relate to these issues that you were thinking about?
Thanks. Wow, good questions. I think question number one, how autobiographical. I think very little, seriously, because I hate people to find out what I'm like. And I think that it's only maybe autobiographical in two aspects. Number one of the characters is very spiritually cynical. I think that kind of, I find it easier to think how he think when I'm writing about him. So it must reflect something about me. And I think the second aspect, maybe I'm also the youngest man around. What did I learn about? what I learned about myself is what I learned about a lot of people too. In fact, it's changing all the time. As I work through the novel, even my view of the story and my interpretation of the characters have changed quite dramatically throughout that 8 months when the framework was being written. So I think that is the most important thing, and I like to keep that lesson, because to define ourselves one way or the other doesn't last.
Kind of avoiding the question.
What is it?
Avoiding the question. So what is the lesson then?
The lesson.
That you personally learned?
I personally,
Yourself.
yeah, I think that is. I'm changing all the time. I do think that I'm changing all the time, and there's nothing wrong with it. And also maybe if I don't think there's any lesson per se that I learned for myself, and from there on I can rely on that lesson and become a better person. In that sense, I didn't learn anything. But I learned about some of the, maybe perhaps the hidden perspectives in me, you know. And I do think that women and men, the difference between women and men, and in here you would find out I do portray women to be, in drastic situations, much stronger. In this kind of situation, women are much stronger. Just don't no bullshit. We just want to survive, that kind of thing. Whereas men, after so many decades of spoiling, we tend to be more intellectual and talk about it and so on. But we've lost that. On the other hand, we've lost that caveman instinct, which our ancestors have. We're not tough anymore. We are very intellectual, but you know, going round and round in a circle, getting nowhere. Whereas the women do the dishes. Well, I didn't learn anything about myself. I learned something about women.
Thank you. Any other questions or observations? At the back, please.
Hello, I'm probably the youngest. So my question comes with my age. So I'm a PhD student, so I have to write on a weekly basis. So my question is, how do we encourage young people to write more? Like nowadays we read a lot, we read through our phones, computers, internet, whatever, but I do not have friends who write on a regular basis. So how do you encourage young people to write more, especially write professionally?
Excellent question. I don't know whether I have the answer, but that's a very good question, and it reflects a lot of what we're doing. I think number one, to encourage them to write, they have to start reading, and to read books. I'm quite disappointed that so few people read books anymore. Men's last song was selling very well in a few democs. It was even bestseller in the one in Lyndhurst Terrace, but they've all subsequently closed. It's got nothing to do with me. But the coincidence is spooky, and it's very heartbreaking. I think that, as I pointed out, there's endless distraction. I really think to be realistic, and not to be realistic, only a very small minority will be talked into having a better reading habit. And once they have a better reading habit, the things they get from the book will encourage them to write, and to write better. But I'm afraid it will be the minority. I do think that not having, like, both my daughters have very good reading habits, but we don't have a TV at home. I wasn't joking. I haven't had one since 1982. So my older girl, 25 now, grew up without a TV. She even thanked me a few years ago. She said, "That's wonderful, you know." I said, "Thanks, Bob," I said, "what, you know, for us growing up without a TV. I've now noticed what a privilege it is." This is a true story, but she could be lying, you know, she lies. But they have very good reading habits, and therefore, because they have the reading habit, they write relatively well. I think that's quite important. Buy books, right, Julian?
Yes, write it first and then buy them.
I wanted to ask ask a question which is not handled in the book, and I'm not saying that it should be handled, but of lately there have been a lot of, like there are people who are consciously making changes. There are people who are eating well, wanting to buy food which is grown in a different way. So there is a small portion in the world who are aware and consciously making changes in various ways. So do you think that, like how is it going to contribute, that portion, how is it going to grow and contribute towards the future that we're going to have? And why did you not address that in the book?
Thank you very much.
Actually, I have addressed that indirectly. But if I answer your question, these are all very good things, provided that it's done with minimal research and rational decision. Because if a lot of time we do it because it's fashionable, because it's in WhatsApp, people say, oh no, start eating cholesterol tomorrow, you know, because it's good for you, and no more cholesterol day after. You know, if you're doing that kind of thing, it's pointless. But there's a lot of that going on. But it's still not bad, because if the intention is there, that's step number one. I would encourage it rather than just deride it and ridicule them. You know, I'm not that cynical. I would encourage them, but I think that it would be good if you want to make a lifestyle change. Invest that little bit of time, not much, a little bit of time to find out what it means, you know. And in the lifestyle changes, you know, for instance, Teresa's taking a nap. I mentioned,
I'm
you
not
know.
taking a nap. I'm just meditating.
No, for example,
That's what you're wrong.
she's investor. What about investing? You know, investing. There's nothing wrong with it. But in fact, related to the book is, if I can give an analogy. In our whole life, all we can eat is, say, 10 tons of rice. You know, don't Google it, it's just an arbitrary number. If all our life we can eat 10 tons of life, and now I have accumulated, for example, I might have accumulated 15 tons, that's why I retired. But a lot of people have accumulated 200 tons, 6,000 tons, even 200,000 tons of rice. And you might say that's absurd. You know, all you can eat, you eat full time. You can only eat 10 tons of rice. Why do you need 200,000 tons? And not only they say, well, now I've got 200,000 tons. I might as well spend my time, you know, meditating, doing yoga, reading, buy some books, read, learn to write, and so on. Even learn calligraphy, even write longhand. And many things you can do to make your life more interesting. But instead, you know what they do? They invest that surplus rice in investment and try to get more rice, which they don't need. And worse, and they even set targets. They said, oh, this extra 199,000 tons of rice should generate a return of minimum 5%. But last year, it's only 4.5%. So he's disappointed, he's pissed off, he's stressed, and get bad breath as well, because his investment is not delivering, it's not on target. I have to talk to my investor, maybe I'll fire her tomorrow. That kind of thing. You think about it, it's actually a mental disease, but everyone is doing it. Everyone is doing it. And you think, so change of lifestyle for the good takes a bit of thinking, and it doesn't have to be philosophical or very technical. But if we first think about it, plan it, and do it consistently, I think it's always a good thing. And you will learn from it and be willing to change. Once you start it, maybe after 2 years you find, okay, you make adjustments. And I think if everyone can do this, and we start with not wasting, we keep the same lifestyle but stop wasting, it would be a worthwhile thing to do.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, please.
Hi, James. In the course of your writing, have you got any idea about, since you are talking about mental trouble, you know, getting more and more in this world, do you perceive any chance of the end of the world by a certain kind of Third World War, termination of the earth by war instead of the environmental distress you mentioned in your book?
Yeah, it's a question that I have to really, make wild guesses.
Like the leader of North Korea,
Yeah. You know what, even in North Korea, I've recently read an article by an American diplomat who's worked with the North Korean for 20, 30 years. And it made me think, he just said they are just putting on a show. They are not nearly as irrational as it appears, because they know these are the chips and as a nation in that particular situation and so on, which makes a lot of sense because he's dealt with them for years and years. Together they're very rational, they're very calculating, very stubborn, and so on, which I believe. I think that the chance of a very devastating Third World War is there, but it would be by mistake. I think it would be by miscalculation, by mistake, rather than intentional, because although I have so little confidence in contemporary politicians, I don't think in the foreseeable future they're crazy enough to actually trigger something that would be mutual annihilation. I don't see that happening, but there are other things can increase the tension, resources and so on, and food. They increase the tension to a point that, don't forget, we are animals. Ultimately, now in this kind of social condition, for example, it would be wrong, and I do agree it's wrong, to steal or to rob. But imagine that we all need food to eat. That's what we're doing. We're living like animals. There's no concept called theft or robbery, because I see a piece of bread, you're taking it, I will go over. If I can afford it, I kick you in the head, I grab the piece of bread and run. That's just a normal human behavior. I don't think we would get to that point also. But there will be, from the optimistic side, I do think that it will get so bad to a point that there will be an awakening. But before then, there will be pain. There will be pain. But I think that we are still, human beings are still capable of thinking again, still capable of leadership, problem solving, and get us out of what we are today, because right now it's very comfortable, but it won't last very long. And I think that awakening will happen, but before then it will be quite painful.
Thank you very much. So, a very interesting final question, I'm afraid, an interesting answer. Thank you very much to the audience, it's been wonderful. Lovely questions, very interesting questions, and James for batting them back so well. And thank you very much indeed to the University of Hong Kong Library's Reading Club, all the staff, their organisation, their support is very much appreciated.
Thank you, James. Thank you, Gillian, for being our moderator and our speaker. And on behalf of the library, I'd like to present you with a gift.
Thank you.
And going back to if I could throw in some questions, going back to two questions, the 2090 and the last question. Come after November, the risk might be even higher, and your 2090 might be sooner. And I hope you let me into Canada. And
trouble becomes the president.
Yeah, exactly. That may be the pain before the awakening.
It's scary. It's going completely backwards. Our upcoming book talk will be on Saturday, 7th of May, and our speaker will be the Honourable Dr. Vivian Poy, former Senator of Canada. Notice the trend? Canadians? Yeah. So that'll be an interesting talk on her new book, Heroes and Gamblers, the tale of survival and good fortune of the Poy family. So that'll be on Saturday, 7th of May, here in the special collections from 4 to 7 p.m. 4 to 6 p.m. 4 to 6 p.m. If you are not on our mailing list, feel free to stop by and see me before you leave to give me your email, and we'll be more than happy to add you to our list. Another thing is coming up, you may have seen some of the construction work down on the second floor. It'll be our new second floor entrance for the library, the main library, which we also are going to have a brand new exhibition area. Exhibition area will probably about the size of this open area. And we'll be having some initial, well, we're waiting for the contractors and the building departments to give us the go-ahead, but we're hoping to have some very exciting exhibitions soon after. All right, so thank you for coming and enjoy your evening.